House Labor Committee will now come to order. Mr. Clerk, please take attendance.
Chair Hatzma.
Here.
Representatives Menser.
Here.
Colazar.
Here.
O'Neill.
President.
Andrews.
Here.
Churches.
Present.
Gella. Here. Wozniak.
Here.
Mueller.
Here.
Coontz.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. May I have a motion to adopt the minutes of the June 15? Representative Colazar makes that motion to adopt minutes of the June 15, 2023 meeting. We're here to continue to take testimony on a series of bills. We have some who weren't able to speak last week. So first I'm going to call up Shane Hernandez and Jason Thomas to speak on, it says 4231. Correct me if I'm incorrect, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, I think last week I put in a card opposing 4231 and 37, but I'm here to speak only on 4231 today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members, for the opportunity to testify today on behalf of the approximately 1,000 members of Associated Builders and Contractors of Michigan and the over 80% of the construction industry that would be negatively affected by this legislation. I'm sure most of you know my public service background prior to becoming the president of ABC of Michigan, but I want to take a minute and talk about my background before serving in the legislature. I grew up in a union household with my father serving as the president of his local at the Croswell Pickle Factory. I have a master's degree in architecture and worked on the design and construction administration of countless commercial construction projects over the course of 12 years. I even did a short stint at a small construction company as a project manager prior to coming to ABC. I know the industry well and made a good living in construction prior to serving in office. We've heard plenty of testimony last week and in the Senate committee yesterday from the bill sponsor and others about local control and decisions being made locally, but I'm here today to talk about fairness and equitable access to opportunity. The Fair and Open Competition in Governmental Construction Act and similar provisions are in place in 25 states today and protecting fairness in the bidding process across the United States. No one should be denied equal access to opportunity because they decide to affiliate or not affiliate with a labor union. Removal of the safeguards currently in place would allow for governments to mandate the use of discriminatory project labor agreements, which are collective bargaining agreements on a specific project. Government-mandated PLAs are problematic for numerous reasons, two of which I will share with you today, and the remainder of which, in the interest of time, you can find in a memo that has been shared with you. I think you got it last week and you got it again today. The first one I want to talk about is that non-union companies will be required to sign a PLA on a job will be required to pay double fringe benefits. These companies already pay employee health care and retirement costs for their employees, and under PLAs, they must also pay union pension and health care plans as required by the terms of the collective bargaining agreement. This forces employers and non-union workers to pay double benefits into plans in order to keep their employees' health coverage and retirement in place, as well as paying into the union plans. And keep in mind, these are benefits that the employees will never receive because the PLA is only in place for one particular job. And the second area of concern, and even more concerning in my opinion, is that PLAs will ban a large number of apprentices from a job site. Because collective bargaining agreements only cover union apprenticeships, PLAs will result in apprentices being utilized exclusively from union apprenticeship programs. Unfortunately, apprentices in U.S. Department of Labor registered programs through community colleges, universities, company training programs, trade schools are all excluded. At a time when we're encouraging our youth to seek all opportunities before them, excluding students from any Department of Labor registered apprenticeship program is not something we should be doing to our future workers. ABC of Michigan shares the goals of growing our population and making Michigan a leading state for families and businesses to move to. This bill will turn our state into the wrong direction, raising the cost of construction on our schools, housing, and infrastructure. It will leave out a large portion of the next generation of building trades workers and discriminate against over 80% of our building trades workforce. We urge a no vote on House Bill 4231 and hope to have further discussion on the items I've laid out today and the additional items we have outlined in the memo on your desk. And at this time, I'll let Jason introduce himself and share some words.
Good morning. My name is Jason Thomas. I'm the president and CEO of Ritzma Associates. We're an interiors contracting firm based out of Granville, Michigan, with offices in Traverse City and Kalamazoo. I'm here today representing the 160 employees that we have and their families. So Ritzma was started in 1955 when Herb Ritzma left the service, had $100 in his pocket, went down and bought on credit back in those days, somewhat like a pawn shop, his first mixer, had to pay it off in 90 days or he would have been bankrupt. Herb would work all day long and then he would do bids at night. And that was the basis of how our company came to be who we are today. One of the biggest things that Herb did for our people was create opportunities. And as we look at the things that are going on and we talk about the apprenticeship piece of this specifically, having served on a local school board, I can tell you that finding opportunities for young people to be in apprenticeship programs is big. And that opportunity then being able to extend them into their local communities to do work is a huge piece of why this bill is bad. Having apprentices with local companies working in their local school systems and other projects that could be based there is a big piece of the opportunity that can be created for them. Many local great contractors have great apprenticeship programs that are registered with the DOL that would be void and not be able to participate. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Any questions? Yeah. Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Hernandez, good to see you again. I appreciate your background in construction and architecture, and now your new role in ABC. Could you tell me what you think, if this bill passed, what would happen to the bonding capabilities of municipalities and school districts?
Well, I don't know that I can speak specifically on the bonding capabilities of municipalities and school districts, but my opinion, if this bill passes and there's proof across the country from where PLAs have been used, where they've been implemented, that it will raise the cost of construction on their projects 12 to 20%. You will get less bidders on those projects. And I know it was said last week that it will keep construction local. I'm from a more rural area, and PLAs will actually result in less local bidders and more people coming in from out of town bidding those projects. And to me, all three of those things are negative effects for municipalities and school districts.
So, for an example, say if I bonded out for a school for $2 million, I might end up only with $1.5 million in value?
There's potential to that. I mean, I believe that we just recently passed approximately $1.8 billion in bonding on a millage ballot, and I would say that you could get 12 to 20% less out of that, based on studies that have been done on PLAs and costs associated with PLAs.
Thank you for your expertise.
Representative Kuntz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you both for coming today. To me, the exclusion of apprenticeships is egregious. This is personally offensive to me, and we talked about this last week. Any numbers on this? Is there any way we can quantify? That's a tough question, but you're right. The trade schools, the community colleges in my district, is there any way we can quantify how many kids are going to be left out of a path to these jobs?
I mean, I think it's difficult to put a specific number on that. We're still reaching out to different community colleges to understand their programs, but there are employer-based programs as well. You know, I guess what I would say to that is that 80% of the construction industry in the state of Michigan is non-union and is drawing their apprentices from somewhere other than union apprenticeship programs.
80%. Thank you.
I can offer something a bit more local. Serving on the local school board, we graduated 223 kids. We had 40 kids that were leaving to go into the trades. Of those 40 kids, one person was entering a union apprenticeship program. The other were entering somewhere else inside of the field, either in an electrical field or plumbing field or somewhere else.
All right. Thank you both.
Representative Wagella.
So just in reference to apprenticeships with project labor agreements, isn't it up to local governments to decide the finite details of the project labor agreement? So the assumption that apprenticeship programs would have to be union might be incorrect because a local government could decide whether or not they are, right? Isn't that my understanding of project labor agreements? So we're kind of jumping to some conclusions there. Is that not true?
Well, I think we're saying that, one, based on a history of project labor agreements, also based on a history of what collective bargaining agreements include, which are benefits, pay, placement of employees. So I think we're saying that with some pretty good historical context. I would also say in what situation should it be voluntary to exclude them. That's why we're saying this is a safeguard against even having the option to do that, and we believe that should be kept in place.
And if I may ask one more question, Chair.
Yes.
In reference to increased cost, assuming that is the truth, why are those costs increased? Do they have something to do with employees making better wages and benefits and having stronger safety conditions? Which, I don't know, in my life, when I make decisions about what I'm going to purchase, I try to be conscious that my purchasing decisions affect the employers who create the products.
Well, I think Jason will have something to add to this, but for a non-union contractor to bid on a PLA to have to pay double benefit costs, I don't think is making somebody's benefit package better. It's just simply unfair, but I'll let Jason elaborate as well.
First off, addressing safety. I don't believe that there are anybody that's more safe than ourselves when we go into an organization. We have a 0.5 EMR, which if you know anything about construction, that's a very low experience modification rate. And that cost is not any different, I think, for any contractor versus one another. Where the costs start to change is that we have the cost of what it takes for us to put a great benefits program forward, what it costs for us to put a great retirement program forward for our employees versus what's mandated through prevailing wage, which is that ship has already sailed, obviously. So they've got the wage thing already straightened out. So we start to now adding these other different things, like we talked about having to pay double benefits, having to pay for a pension that my employees will probably never use. And, we've got lots of 30, 40-year employees that are with us. And, them having to have these one-off things that are inside of all of this that add these additional costs into those things. And you can see, if you want to look at the numbers across the state, when you say now we have things that are Davis-Bacon wages, for example, look at what the cost of those projects do when they go into a Davis-Bacon programming versus when they're not. And you'll see an increase in the cost.
So just again to clarify, local governments would have to enter into these agreements willingly. So that would be a decision a community could make if they want to.
I think Shane said it as well too. History doesn't show us that. So we can speculate that would be what would happen, but I think history tells us a different story.
Explain that. History tells you a different story, that local governments aren't willfully entering into project labor agreements?
Well, I think what we're saying is that history shows us that collective bargaining agreements do include benefits and do include placement of apprentices and employees.
Yeah, but who decides to enter those agreements? The local governments. That's the point I was making.
Sure, and we're saying that the local shouldn't, this is a protection in place. The local government shouldn't have the option to force a bidder to pay two benefits packages, not use the apprentices from a Department of Labor registered school that isn't a union school.
Representative Wagella, we're going to go to Representative Andrews a moment, and if you want to ask some more questions, you're welcome to come back. Representative Andrews.
Thank you, Chair. Two questions, really. First question, so I live in a border community, and one of the problems that we have consistently is that contractors from Indiana come across the state line, bid on our local projects, pay substandard wages, and then throughout the project will change order the project in order to, get more money out of the project while still winning the bid by being the lowest bidder, since, we're more or less required to take the lowest bid with a few exceptions. So in the absence of having project labor agreements and those sorts of things, many of our local contractors, union and otherwise, simply do not apply or bid on the jobs because they know that they're going to get underbid by contractors that are not fairly bidding on the project to begin with, something that the PLAs really help to prevent by taking out a lot of the guesswork in those frameworks. So I guess my first question I'm trying to understand is, how is this bad for our local contractors, like you were previously saying, when the main problem, at least from where I live, is that we have out-of-area contractors coming in and undercutting all of our local workforce?
We do a fair amount of work down around the border area. New Buffalo, Berrien Springs, we've just completed a couple of projects in those areas. We didn't see any out-of-state contractors that came in to bid on those. One of the things that I think that as you kind of talk about, one of the things that perhaps prevailing wage, because that's passed already, is going to do is it's going to level the wage. So now we start to get into, again, where we're paying double benefits, or we're creating an uneven plan for business. So we have to be conscious of that thing, just what you're saying as well too. If we're creating an uneven level of business for us to be able to compete in those border areas, it could actually be causing the opposite of what you're saying, is that you're disenfranchising or disincentivizing your local contractor, then particularly locally based contractors that are along the shore or along that side of the border, particularly on the west side of the state, tend to be merit contractors. So when we create these other create these things that are based in what we're talking about with PLAs and some of the other things, we're creating that disadvantage, if you will, for a local contractor or for local people to come and do that work.
I have experienced the opposite multiple times, and to reference multiple instances of local contractors who don't bother to bid because of the out-of-state contractors coming in and undercutting them. Also note that the prevailing wage change only applies to jobs that have state funding or federal funding, Davis-Bacon. So one of the other nice things about both of the bills we have in front of us is that they give local governments the ability to wage set and level set on projects where they're using their own money and not using state or federal funds. Second question I have, though, is talking about the potential for a project labor agreement to require payment into pension funds and that sort of thing. And I'm just curious what's preventing you guys from joining the union in the first place, signing a peace agreement, and having your employees take advantage of all of those benefits that are often very, very good benefits.
Go ahead. I mean, if you want to talk from your perspective.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we're not in a union positive area, number one, but I think the number two piece of that is that what we provide to our employees from a benefits package, from a retirement package through their 401k, but then also just through, in general, what our work environment is, the culture that we create, and all of those things, there's no reason why we would even want to consider that. And our competitiveness outside of public work as well too, and what we do inside of that, you know, with 160 employees, when you continue to grow and add employees, we must be doing something right, and we must have something that's attractive.
And I would just add to that, I mean, we're not suggesting anything that wouldn't allow a member of ours to join a union, but when you look across the country, the reality is approximately 90% of the construction industry has chosen not to.
Well, when you undercut the ability for labor unions to form and organize, it's obvious why that happens. But thank you.
Representative Wegel, anything else? Thank you, gentlemen. We're next going to hear from a witness by Zoom. It's Janet Lathrop from the National Employment Law Project, and she is going to testify by Zoom in support of 4237.
Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you well. Thank you. Good morning.
Thank you, members of the House Labor Committee, for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Janet Lathrop, and I'm a senior researcher and policy analyst at the National Employment Law Project. We're known as NELP. NELP is a nonprofit, nonpartisan advocacy organization with a mission to build a just and inclusive economy. We partner with federal, state, and local lawmakers on a wide range of workforce issues, including minimum wage and wage preemption policies. NELP testifies today in strong support of HB 4237, which would repeal Public Act 105 of 2015, which currently prohibits labor local laws, including minimum wage. Preemption repeal would give cities and counties in Michigan the ability to set their minimum wages and enact other labor policies that better reflect local conditions and local needs. Currently, the state minimum wage is just $10.10 an hour, which, while the cost of living throughout the state surpasses that hourly wage. For instance, take Washtenaw County and its main city, Ann Arbor, where a single adult without children needs to earn nearly $19 per hour just to afford rent, food, and other basic necessities. Or Detroit, where a single adult needs to earn nearly $16.50 an hour just to make ends meet. And even more affordable areas of the state, such as Mackinac County, Hillsdale County, the cost of living surpasses $10.10 an hour. With preemption repeal, Detroit, Ann Arbor, Ypsilanti, Washtenaw County as a whole, and any other city and county in Michigan would be able to adopt local wages. As long as there was public and political support for these policies, Michigan municipalities would be able to enact wage policies that reflect local costs of living. Minimum wage policies benefit all underpaid workers, but are especially important for Black and other workers of color. This is because racism, occupational segregation, and other forms of structural oppression push workers of colors towards the lowest paid jobs. Thus, when minimum wage increases, so do the incomes of underpaid workers, especially workers of color. And when localities are prohibited from raising their own wage floors, workers of color are the most affected. Thus, lifting preemption would bring Michigan one step closer to racial justice. There's an extensive body of research on the minimum wage dating back at least 3 decades. And the methods that have been used to understand the relationship between wage policies and employment have improved greatly over the past 10 years, which allow researchers to isolate the effects of minimum wage policies. I won't go into the whole body of research because that's really vast, but the near consensus among researchers is that minimum wage policies boost the incomes of underpaid workers without leading to employment losses. I will actually close my remarks now, but I am available for questions later if you have any. But I will close my remarks by pointing to the experience of Colorado, which made history in 2019 by becoming the first state to repeal minimum wage preemption. Soon after repeal, Denver adopted its own minimum wage, and now Boulder County and at least 2 other counties in Colorado are considering adopting their own wage floors. Elected officials in those counties are hearing from their constituents about the need for wages that are higher than what's required under state law. Colorado counties are able to consider those policies because in 2019, communities demanded wage preemption and wage preemption repeal and won. I thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Are there any questions of Ms. Lathrop? Representative Wakela.
Thank you so much for your really important testimony today. I was curious if you had an answer to this. If minimum wage had kept up with productivity since its inception, what would the minimum wage be? Or do we have an area or a guess of what it would be if it kept up with productivity? Because I've heard numbers anywhere from $22 to $26 an hour.
Yeah, that's about the right range. I think between 24 and 26, depending on how you measure it. But yeah, productivity was decoupled from the minimum wage a while back, and I believe in the late 1970s. And because of that, productivity has still continued to trend up, but minimum wage has stagnated basically.
Any other questions? Thank you, Ms. Lathrop.
Thank you.
We're next hear from Dave Worthams from the Michigan Manufacturers Association in opposition to House Bill 4237.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning.
Good morning.
And to the members of the committee. My name is Dave Worthams. I am the Director of Employment Policy for the Michigan Manufacturers Association. MMA represents nearly 1,800 members from New Buffalo to the Sioux and from Luna Pier to Iron Mountain. Our membership covers the full spectrum of manufacturing industries and ranges from small manufacturers to some of the world's most impactful corporations. We are proud that over 85% of our members are small businesses with fewer than 100 employees. And it is because of what these small manufacturers experience daily as they strive to leave a positive impact on the communities they are a part of that we come today to express our concerns and our opposition to House Bill 4237, which will repeal the Local Government Labor Regulatory Limitation Act, also known as Act 105. During the remarkably busy days of the 102nd Michigan Legislature, we have shared with many of you our policy priorities, our legislative agendas, compete to succeed in a manufacturing vision for Michigan. On the list of policy principles in that document that we believe will support a competitive manufacturing sector is the request that you resist intrusion into the employer-employee relationship. We proposed that policy plank not to preclude a debate on what is a fair wage for Michiganders, but to help ensure the decision is made by the appropriate parties. We firmly believe that employment decisions are best made through discussions between employers and employees, or between employers and their employee union representatives. If there is to be a decision about the workplace outside of that dyad, then it should be made by the entity that can most fairly impact all involved, and that would be you, not the 1,800 local municipalities in the state. We believe, especially for a small manufacturer operating in multiple locations throughout the state, that it is critical for the legislature to preempt local action so there is consistency in managing facilities and to ensure that our members can stay competitive here, nationally, and internationally. Having to face the potential of a patchwork system of different employment regulations creates a disincentive to grow business in the state, and is something that I am sure was an unintended consequence that your predecessors in the 98th Michigan legislature contemplated when they voted for Act 105 in 2015. So today we continue to highlight the importance of Act 105 and ask that you defend it. Avoiding the patchwork nightmare is the best way for the state to remain competitive. It is the best way to build a foundation of consistency that will empower Michigan's efforts to find, develop, and keep the talent that we need to move the Great Lakes state forward to a bright future. We are opposed to the passage of 4237, and we urge you to vote against reporting it to the full House. With that, Mr. Chairman, thank you for the time and the opportunity, and I am happy to answer any questions that you or the members may have.
Thank you, Mr. Worthams. Representative Kuntz.
Mr. Werther, thank you for coming today. You represent a wide base of manufacturing, and this is a difficult question. Are any of your members trying to hire at minimum wage?
No. No, in fact, if you take a look at the written testimony that I gave the committee last week, on average, we're about 24% higher than most other industries. The market dictates that if we're going to attract the talent, we've got to pay them the wages and the benefits that they are seeking.
Correct, and of open voluntary. And I wish we could go back to testifiers, because I'd love to have that information from the construction industry. I think we keep hearing about minimum wage. Is that really a relevant statistic? Is minimum wage, that doesn't even come into play when you're hiring, when your members are hiring, is it?
No, it really doesn't. And what we've experienced since COVID is that people are choosing to work more remotely. They're choosing to work from home more often than anything. And so to attract them, we have to craft not just a wage and benefit package, but sometimes have to offer, for those who are working on the engineering side of things, the option to work remotely. That's what people are looking for, and we do our best to try to discover what that is, to honor that, to meet that, and if we have to work with a union that we have an agreement with, we try to have that discussion with what should that fair wage be, because that's where that decision is best and fairly applied.
Thank you, sir.
Representative Andrews.
Thank you, Chair. So, we all agree that there's multiple levels of government that have wage setting power, right? Obviously, the federal government has a minimum wage set, and the state of Michigan has a minimum wage set. I'm interested in why it is that you think a unit of government representing 10 million people is more qualified to understand what a fair wage or fair benefit package for people are than a unit of government representing a significantly smaller number of people that would be more in touch with the unique contours of each of those municipalities.
Because that's what you were sent here for, sir.
I disagree. We were sent here to pass policy.
If I could finish. The legislature has the ability and the role to try to make sure that laws are fairly applied, fairly executed throughout all 83 counties, and to set up a policy base that I think avoids the unintended consequence of creating sections of the state that do not have the wages that you're asking for. And so I think to empower municipalities who, again, we have to think of worst case scenario, could have dramatically different employment regulations from one another, not just based on wages, but could be based on any sort of employment condition, I think leads that disincentive to growing business here. And that in turn harms the state. I think the state legislature's job is to do what's best to try to make sure that the state, for the long run, in all 83 counties and all 535 cities and villages, have putting a fair and equitable approach to that, and you can set that tone.
I mean, short of abolishing local government, we give plenty of control to local units of government to set standards for their local communities. It strikes me as frankly arbitrary that we would decide that this is not a power they should have. I would say that our job as legislators is not to dictate for the whole state. It's our job to decide what is right for the citizens of this state. And that means at times granting more power to individual units of government rather than taking it away. I fail to understand why a city of duly elected commissioners would not have the best interest of their citizens in mind, and why we as legislators wouldn't be able to take cues from our local governments as well. And we have a long history of home rule in Michigan. I would say we probably have one of the strongest traditions of local government control in the country. So this seems to me to be more of an anomaly that we took this local control away than not. And as you yourself have said, many in your industry are already paying above minimum wage. So it seems to me like you have very little to worry about from us granting local control on this issue. And really the people that need to worry about this are the ones that have substandard wages and benefits packages.
Mr. Chairman, may I respond?
Yes, Mr. Worthams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't think this is an issue about wages. This is an issue about who gets to make the decision. What is the proper level of government to make that decision? Our argument is that it should be the state government, because that is the entity that I think can best provide that consistency in avoiding the outliers that may happen from time to time. Further, I believe if you take a look at the vehicle code, if you take a look at the MIOSHA code, you will find numerous places where the state has preempted local action because there is an understood need to have consistency from municipality to county, from city to villages, all throughout the state in certain aspects, in certain public policy aspects. We believe that employment policy is best settled by the state to make sure we have that consistency.
One last, if I could.
Yes, thank you.
I would say that safety standards and vehicle standards are completely different than wages. Safety, no matter where you live. Wages and standards of living are dramatically different depending on where you live. I can say even within my own district, there are communities where a house costs $750,000 on average, and communities where a house costs $50,000 on average. Those communities obviously have dramatically different standards of living, and how am I and us at a state level supposed to determine that people in those two communities deserve to be paid the exact same wage and have the exact same benefits? It's a lot different than safety standards. I mean, the same things are going to kill people no matter where they are. That's all.
And I think that's one of the
Yes,
unintended
you may answer.
Thank you. I think that's one of the unintended consequences that we fear. While I appreciate the passion and believe that there should be a debate on wages and on those benefits, the unintended consequence of removing the preemption, which may allow local units to go into different areas of employment policy, that's the disincentive that my members are concerned about.
Representative Wagella.
Thank you for your testimony today. I have a series of questions, but the first one is, what is the lowest estimated starting wage by one of your members? Like, what is the lowest? Because you said no one was at minimum, but do you have a guess on what the lowest wage would be for starting?
I would have to check our latest compensation survey, which we actually will probably release in about a month. But pulling from memory, I want to say the lowest is around $25 an hour.
Okay, that's higher than I thought the answer was going to be, admittedly. But I think the point is, in all localities, we do have people making minimum wage, and we do have people making less than a living wage. And I think that's a really important part of this discussion, that if local governments decide that their employees deserve to have paid time off, deserve to have a wage that they can survive in. You need $19 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom apartment in the state of Michigan today. And as we just saw from our last testimony, minimum wage, if it stayed up to pace with productivity, would be $24 to $26 an hour. The Michigan minimum wage is $10.10. I think it would be hard for me to believe that anyone at this committee, on both sides of this committee, would agree that that's an acceptable wage for someone to survive. So my question to you is, do workers in all of our country and the state of Michigan deserve to have a livable wage working 40 hours a week? Do you believe that?
I think that workers deserve to be paid in a manner consistent with the understanding that they have with their employer or with something that's been established by their union. I think for this particular bill, sir, the question is beyond wage and benefit. I think for this particular bill, it is about those unintended consequences and the disincentives that those unintended consequences place on small manufacturers.
Sure, but what you just said, from my understanding, is that it is okay for an employer to pay someone less than a livable wage as long as someone agrees to that wage. And my question is, my point is, I think people are agreeing to wages lower than they would desire because they have no other choice. Because we, as a society, have not put the protections in place for our most vulnerable members of our community. And the point, I think, of this bill is to allow local governments to make that decision that we want to protect each other. We want to take care of each other in our communities. And I think maybe we just disagree here, but I appreciate your testimony.
Mr. Chairman?
Thank you for asking, Mr. Worthington. Yes, you may respond.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate having the debate. I think that's the way that good public policy is handled here. I do take exception, though, to the way that you tried to describe my answer. My answer was not about, I think it's fine for people to take less than minimum wage or anything like that. No, my answer is to express our continued belief that the best employment policies are made in that dyad between the employer and the employee, and that the employee should be empowered. If the employer is not going to meet the wage that they're looking for, okay, let's give you opportunities to find other employers who will, and allow the market to kind of dictate that end of it. But it was not to cruelly say or try to cruelly portray that someone should take a lower paid job. That was not the intent of my answer.
Can I follow up with one more? If not, that's fine. But
Yes.
before the minimum wage, how did it work, allowing the market to determine that? We had child labor. We had people barely surviving, right? So I think that's not
and I think you helped build my case for who instituted those laws. It was the state legislature, it was the federal government, it was not local municipalities.
I'm sure that there were some locals, but I think I'd have to double check that history. But I appreciate the sparring.
So do I.
Yeah.
So I appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Representative Wagella. Any other questions of Mr. Worthams? Thank you, Mr. Worthams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. We're next to hear from Jeremy Garza in his role as Ward 2 Commissioner with Lansing City Council. Good morning.
Thank you, Chair Hodsma and members of the committee for allowing me to provide testimony today. My name is Jeremy Garza. I currently serve as the Vice President for the Lansing City Council, although I'm here to speak on behalf of myself and not behalf of the City of Lansing. I'm here this morning to speak in support of House Bill 4231 and House Bill 4237. My constituents elected me to the Lansing City Council because I promised to create and maintain good quality jobs in our community, and that's exactly what these bills do. House Bill 4231 repeals the ban on local governments from entering into project labor agreements. Project labor agreements have been widely used in the public and private sectors for decades and to great success. PLAs are effective mechanisms for controlling construction costs, ensuring efficient completion of projects, and establishing fair wages and benefits for all workers. PLAs also help ensure workers' health and safety protections. PLAs are predetermined bid specifications, wage scales, safety specifications, and deadlines. Unions and non-union companies bid on PLA projects. I'm a licensed plumber pipe fitter by trade, and I know the firsthand that the construction sector all too often wants more opportunities to use cheap, unskilled, unsafe, and sometimes illegal misclassified labor to cut corners to win bids. Oftentimes, this means out-of-area contractors using out-of-area workers to construct these projects, meaning most of the time, these dollars earned by the construction workforce leave our community as soon as they're earned. Project labor agreements are proven to result in more construction dollars staying local than the traditional lowest bidder models. PLAs ensure that the wages paid to construction workers are on par with the wages in the community while creating local jobs. I don't want to participate in driving down wage standards or the quality of life of my constituents. PLAs also ensure that construction jobs are safe. PLAs have exemplary safety records. On council, some of the biggest priorities are to making sure that our roads and construction projects are safe, built to last, on time, on or under budget. Project labor agreements are a win-win for local communities. When we successfully implement project labor agreements, workers win, communities win, and ultimately the taxpayer wins. House Bill 4237 will restore local control to Lansing and hundreds of other cities in Michigan. Now, this one's basic. My constituents elected me to do a job. They elected me to ensure that there are quality jobs in our city, that they can raise a family with dignity. But unfortunately, we all know that everyday working families are all too often overlooked in politics. Frankly, I find it offensive that the state legislature would think it knows the needs of local communities better than the local officials themselves. On the city council, we go back and forth with each other and we meet in the middle based on what our constituents need. The state government sets the minimum health, safety, and workplace standards. Before 2015, local governments could localize these standards and, when necessary, build and strengthen them. When voters learn about how preemption is abused, they often see for what it is for: deep-pocketed corporations exerting their influence in the state capitol at the expense of the taxpayers. Once again, my voters elected me to represent them and to make sure the Lansing City government works for them, no matter who they are or where they came from. I think that means the state legislature should respect local leaders when they determine something is best for their community. That's why we have local governments, and that's why we have democracy. Thank you for your time today, and I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Councilman Garza. Any questions? Representative Wagella.
I was just wondering if you could elaborate more on this. We've talked a lot about minimum wage, but I think a really important part of this is paid and unpaid leave time. That discussion about paid leave for employees. Can you talk a little bit more about how under this repeal that might change and how that would benefit workers?
Well, I think it gives the opportunity for the local governments to decide that. You know, I mean, traditionally, we don't see the paid leave. And, you know, I'm in a union. We represent about 12,000 members in the state of Michigan, and we just recently allowed for paid leave for women for maternity leave. And I think that's very important, especially for the single moms that can't, are afraid to lose their jobs because they have to take time off work after having a baby. So I think that's an issue for local governments, and I think it's important that we let them decide.
Representative Kuntz.
Sir, thank you for coming. I apologize. You are speaking for the city of Lansing, or these your views are your own?
These are my own.
Okay, thank you. I just want to clear that. That was not my question, Mr. Chair. But patchwork, if we have different rules in every municipality, for instance, we talked about working from home. Do you see the issue with the lack of continuity and how difficult this would be for an industry to move if every municipality had different sets of rules? Can you acknowledge that?
Yeah, I can, and thanks for the question. So I think when the state and federal governments are bogged down, gridlocked, plagued by inaction, local governments should be able to decide what's best for their communities.
Would you extend that to prevailing wage and right to work?
Well, I'm here to talk about these two House bills, so.
So local control only goes how far? I mean, this very committee talked about those issues. I think it is disingenuous to say that this has been a lack of action these past 6 months. I don't think that's, no one sees that. But when we talk about local control, I think we should talk about local control. Do you not support that, or there's only certain issues that have local control?
I guess I don't understand your question, sir.
You sit here and your entire testimony has been about local control. You were offended that we don't give you local control.
Well, we used to have local control, and that was taken away, and I think it worked fine in the previous.
So my question is, would you support local control on right to work and prevailing wage?
I'm not here to talk about that.
That's a great dance. You do well in Lansing. Well done, sir.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, we have Representative Churches to ask a question of you, Mr. Garza.
Thank you, Mr. Garza, for being here today. So I often use my former background of being a teacher to look through the lens of how we meet the needs of our state. And being an educator, you meet the needs of students. And being a legislator, you're meeting the needs of people, just grown-up people and children all put together. And you are deemed an ineffective teacher if you deliver the same instruction to all of the students all of the time, because the students that walk in your classroom are not at the same level in math and reading and science and social studies, and not all the resources you have as an educator, the same exact books and resources, meet the needs of every learner. Some students, it costs more money to meet their needs. Some students, it costs more time to meet their needs. Some students, you have to uncover and develop a personal relationship with them to really understand what they're feeling insecure about, or where they need more support, or where they're doing really well and they need to be pushed to be enriched further. So I'm thinking about this from a state standpoint. I think as legislators, it is our responsibility to provide a framework for our state to be able to have a common standard, right, that we deem appropriate to meet the needs of our people. But then we also need to recognize that one entity does not have the capability to tailor to the needs of each individual effectively and to the best of our ability, just because of the size, right? So I think from this legislation, this is giving that local control back and allowing for municipalities to find ways to meet the needs of their constituents the best way that they see fit. And that takes a lot of trust and collaboration. So I think that these bills almost encourage collaboration in a way, and sometimes collaboration can be really uncomfortable and messy, just like a classroom, right? If you're comfortable in a classroom, that means you're not learning. So if we need to be fostering this collaboration in our communities, and I'm wondering, you talked about ways in which this is beneficial, but like which ways specifically does this legislation promote collaboration or allow local communities to reach the needs of workers and communities that aren't being met now, that maybe you can meet because you will now have more resources or ability to do that?
Okay, well, thank you, Rep. Churches. I appreciate that, and I agree. You know, one size doesn't fit all. And, you know, for instance, to go on your point, larger classrooms, you're not going to get that one-on-one time. You're not going to get the same effectiveness with the state government as you would with a local municipality. And I think it allows the tailored fit per community, because one community, like you said, is not going to be the same as the other community. So, sorry, I don't mean to be the answer on your question, but it was a long one. And but I think it gives the local government control of what's best and lets them provide what's best for their constituents.
Thank you, Representative Churches. Thank you, Councilman Garza. Thanks for coming back this week after being here the prior week. Thank you, Mr. Worthams, for doing the same. And thank you to Mr. Hernandez and his representative from Ritzma. And thank Ms. Lathrop, if you can yet hear us from Zoom, for being on a second week. We have no other cards of individuals wishing to speak. We do have a number of cards in relation to those supporting and opposing the bill, but not wishing to speak. Opposing House Bill 4231 is the Michigan Association of Construction Academies. Opposing 4231 is Diane Middleton from the Midland Business Alliance. Supporting 4231 is Judy Allen of the Michigan Townships Association. Opposing House Bill 4231 is Kelly Mitchell of the Michigan Minority Builders Association. Supporting House Bill 4231 and supporting House Bill 4237 is John Fournier of the City of Ann Arbor. Supporting House Bill 4231 and House Bill 4237 is Dave Hodgkins of the Michigan Municipal League. Opposing House Bill 4237 is Jace Bulger of the West Michigan Policy Forum. Opposing House Bill 4237 is Alicia Robinette of Robinette's Apple House and Winery. Opposing House Bill 4237 is Joe Malone from Plune Service Company. Opposing House Bill 4237 is Mark Brandt, or Grant, but I think it's Brandt, from First Community Bank. Opposing House Bill 4237 is Michael Moraz of Rockford Construction. Opposing House Bill 4237 is Stephen Frederickson of Rockford Construction. Supporting House Bills 4231, 4237, 4497, and Senate Bill 185 is Yusuf Rabi from the Michigan Nurses Association. Opposing Senate Bill 185 is Daniel Hurley of the Michigan Association of State Universities. And Mr. Hurley has a separate card opposing 4497. He again is from the Michigan Association of State Universities. We don't have any excused members. There being no further business before this committee, we now stand adjourned.